After opening up a Flutter project, ever thought, whoa, what are all these files and folders? If yes, then you are not alone. Understanding the structure of a Flutter application is the first step to mastering it. In this video, I will walk you through the files and folders in the Flutter project and explain why they exist and how they fit into building your dream app. Ready to decode the mystery? Then let's dive in. When we first create a Flutter project, we land in the root directory where everything is neatly organized. Think of this as the project command center. It contains all the key components of our application. This is the Flutter project that we have created in our last video. Let's start with the hidden and the system generated folders. Okay, so the first one is .dart_tool. This folder is like Flutter behind the scenes assistant. It catches files specific to our project and even keeps a record of the Flutter SDK version that is used to create it. Okay, so if we go to this version file, this is the Flutter SDK version that is used to create this project. To verify this, we can open up a terminal, type Flutter --version, and if we hit enter, then as you can see over here, this is the same version 3.24.5, the Flutter SDK version. Okay, and this is the Dart version, current Dart version. Okay, now the next folder is the .idea folder. This folder holds the IDE specific settings for IntelliJ IDE or Android Studio. Again, we don't have to modify anything over here. It is managed automatically by the IDE. Third file is the .metadata. Okay, as we can see from the comment over here, this file tracks the properties of our Flutter project, and this file is generally used during the Flutter upgrade process. Okay, so it is managed automatically. We don't have to do anything over here. Now let's talk about the platform specific folder that allows us to run our Flutter application across multiple devices. Okay, so let's start with the Android folder. This folder contains all the files necessary to run our Flutter application on Android devices. Okay, the content of this folder mirrors a standard project structure. Okay, and the key files in this folder are the Android manifest, which is under the app src main. This is the Android manifest file. So this file is important. This file defines our Android app metadata, like the app name, then the icon and some permission. So for example, if we add any external dependency, like suppose if you want to access the contact list in our application, then we need to have the contact list permission to access those contacts in our application. So we have to add that permission over here. Then only our Android application can access the contact list stored in the device. So let me give you an example. If we go to the browser and go to the pub.dev. Pub.dev is the official repository from where we can download the packages. Like for example, we want to add a contact list to our application. Then let's search for contact list. Let's suppose if we select this first package, fast contacts. Okay, so as you can see over here, for Android and iOS project, we need to do some settings. So we have to copy this permission and add that into our Android manifest file. Okay, so these are the only cases where we need to edit those files in the Android project. Okay, so now let's go back to the Visual Studio Code. Now the next platform specific folder is the iOS. Okay, let's close this one, go to the iOS folder. So this folder contains all the files necessary to run our Flutter application on iOS devices. Okay, the content of this folder mirror a standard iOS project structure. Okay, and the key important file in this folder is the info plist, which resides in runner, and this is the info plist.file. This file contains a key value pair which configures our iOS application. Okay, this file contains important information like the bundle ID and permissions. Now, if we go back to the browser window and go to this past contact, as you can see over here, we have to add this section, this key value pair, to our info plist file so that we can access the contacts in our iOS application. So this is the scenario where we need to edit this info plist file for our iOS application. Okay, and the content of this folder are only modified when we need to integrate native feature, as we have seen over here, the contact list, or add any platform specific configuration. Only in those cases we modify the Android and the iOS folder, as we have seen. Now let's run this iOS project on the iOS simulator. Let me select the iOS simulator option. This will launch the iOS simulator. Okay, it's launched. Now let's run the application on our. Okay, so for running we have to make sure we have selected a Dart file. Okay, now let's click on run and debug again. It's launching the application on our iOS simulator. Our Flutter application is now running on iOS simulator, and now if I go back to the info.plist file, as we can see over here, the bundle display name is my iOS Flutter app. And if I go to the iOS simulator, go to the home page, you can see this name is displayed over here, my iOS Flutter app. Okay, so as we can see, this info plist file is used for configuration of our iOS project. Same goes for Android. Now let me stop this and go to the Android project and select the Android emulator. Okay, and now let's run our Flutter project on Android. We can see the same part for Android application. Okay, the Flutter application is now running on Android emulator. Now if I go back to the Explorer, go to the Android project, and as you can see under the Android folder, if I go back to the app, src, main, and Android manifest.xml file, we can see our Android project name is my Android Flutter app. And now if I go to the home screen, this is the name that we can see over here, my Android. It's not completely visible as it's a big name, but as you can see, it starts with my Android Flutter app. Okay, so as we have seen, the info plist and the Android manifest are the two important files for our Android and iOS application. These files contain the important settings for our application. Okay, now let's go through the other remaining platform specific folder like the Linux, Mac OS, web, and Windows. These folders contains the files that are necessary to run our Flutter application on Linux, Mac OS, or as a web application or on Windows platform. Okay, now the next folder is the build folder. Okay, so this is where the Flutter stores the compiled binaries during the build process. It is an auto-generated folder and we don't have to manage it. If we delete this folder, then when we try to run our application, this folder will be generated automatically. Now, the next folder is the lib folder. This folder is heart of our Flutter application. This is where all our Dart code lives for our Flutter application. We use this folder to build our user interface, implement our business logic, call the API to get the data, and much more. Okay, so this is the entry point for our application. It includes a main function okay, which internally calls a runapp function to launch and initialize our app. So this is the directory where we will be spending most of our development time. Now the next folder is the test folder. Good apps need testing, and this is where the test folder comes in. Here we can write unit test, which will test our individual functions. We can also write widget test over here to validate our UI behavior. And we can also write integration test to test our end-to-end flow in our application, so that we can ensure that our app is reliable and stable. Okay. Now let's break down the files that are in the root directory of our Flutter project. Okay. We have already seen the .metadata file. Let's look at the gitignore file. This file specifies the files and folders that should be ignored when we commit our project to the source control. Now the next file is this first Flutter application.yaml file. As we can see over here, this is an XML file. It contains the information that is required for IntelliJ IDE, which it uses to manage the Flutter project. This file is managed by the IntelliJ IDE automatically, and we don't have to do anything over here. Now let's understand the key files that are in the root directory of our Flutter project that every Flutter developer should know. Let's start with analysisoption.yml file. This file is used to configure the static analyzer for our Flutter project. Now, what is static analysis? Static analysis helps us to find problems before running our code. It is a powerful tool for preventing bugs and ensuring that our code follows a particular style guideline. So, whenever we create a new Flutter project, there are some default rules that are included from this Flutter lint package. As we can see over here, include package Flutter lints, and this is the YML file. So, what is YML file? YML file is a configuration file which is in a human readable format. And if we want to see what are the rules that are included in this file, we can go to the browser window. Let's open up another tab and we have to go to this URL. Okay, so this is that Flutter YML file that we have seen over here, flutter.yml. And if we open this, these are the by default rules that are included in our Flutter project. Okay, and now if we go back to the Visual Studio Code, we can use this analysisoption.yml file to disable the rules that are imported from this Flutter lint package Flutter YML file, or to enable additional rules for our Flutter project. For example, if I go back to the browser window, and the first rule in this flutter.yml file is avoid print. Okay, what does this mean? Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. This means I can't use print statement in my Flutter application. Now, if I try to use print and write some text over here, hello world. Okay, so what it will do, it will just print this line to the console. As we can see over here, it printed hello world, but it's showing us a squiggly line. The reason is, as per the rules that we have imported from this flutter.yml file, we can't use print statement in our Flutter project. To disable this rule, what we have to do, we just have to uncomment this first line. Okay, so let's do that. And if I do this and save this file, as we can see over here, the squiggly line that was visible previously, it's now gone. Okay, so this is the file that we'll be using to enable or disable the static analyzer rules. Now, the next file that we will look is the pubspec.yaml file. This file contains a lot of information about our Flutter project. As we can see over here, this is the name of our Flutter project. Okay, description, we can write some description for our Flutter project. Okay, then this section publish_2 is generally used when we are developing a Flutter plugin, so we don't have to do anything right now for this one. Then we can also specify the version for our application. Then environment SDK that is currently being used. Then the dependencies section. Dependencies means, for example, we looked at the contact list. If I go back to the browser window and if I go back to the fast contact plugin, we can add this plugin to our application. So what I have to do, I have to just go to the installing tab and I can just add this in the dependencies section. Let's go back to the Visual Studio Code and I can just add that over here. And if I save this, that package will be downloaded and added to our application. As we can see over here, Flutter plugin dependencies, some new files got added to our project. So in this way, we can add some extra functionality to our application. And what is dev dependency? Dev dependency means there are some packages which are used for code generation purpose or for only testing purpose. So we will be listing those packages under the dev dependency section. Then if we are using images or any extra fonts, then we have to list those in our pubspec.yaml file under this section. Okay, so in general, we'll be modifying this file to manage our app dependencies and assets like images and fonts. Now, the next file that we will look at is the pubspec.log file. As the name suggests, this file logs the version of dependencies used in our Flutter project. So this file ensures that everyone working on the project uses the same version of the dependencies. This file is managed automatically and we don't have to edit this manually. Okay, now the last file that we will look at is the readme.md file. This file is a markdown file for documenting our project. It is often the first file others see when they visit our repository. This file helps people understand what this project is all about, provide detailed instruction for installation and how to use it. It also includes guidelines on how to contribute to this project and also the licensing information. And there you have it, a complete breakdown of all the files and folders in our Flutter project. Next time when you open up a Flutter project, you will know exactly where to look and what each part does. If this video helped you, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more Flutter content. If you have any questions or suggestions, please drop them in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you guys. Until next time, happy coding and keep building awesome Flutter apps.